Hello, art educators. My name is Sarah Ackerman, and with the magic that is Zoom, I am coming to you from Indianapolis, Indiana. I recently joined the Ball State University team as their executive director for teaching innovation. And in this role, my job is to support faculty members, all faculty members really, no matter the modality and no matter the subject in which they teach. Over the years, I've worked with a lot of teachers and I've taught in a lot of different places. But I have to tell you a little secret. Now, don't tell anyone outside of this Zoom room, but art teachers, in my mind, you are the most hardworking and fun-loving group I've had the honor to work with. Your presence here at this virtual conference is an indicator of just how much you love your job and will work towards self-improvement for the sake of your students. And you know what? I would go so far as calling all of you super teachers who have exhibited superpowers during this truly unique time for all of us. This pandemic has challenged all of us in truly profound ways that have impacted our current practices and will likely impact the future of our field at large. That said, I'm here to say that we will prevail. How? Because of our individual and collective superpowers. In order to remind all of us in the room of our individual and collective superpowers, I thought I would share a few stories with you today. As a recent graduate of NAEA's School for Art Leaders, I was reminded of the power of storytelling as a leadership quality during my involvement in that program. School for Art Leaders, known lovingly as SAL, is a transformative program for art teachers and leaders. And I encourage each and every one of you to consider that program moving forward. So here goes. But before I launch into my first story, let me pose a question for the group. What is your superpower as a super art teacher? Please humor me and drop your superpower in the chat box here so we can compare and contrast live here in the call. After you do that, I encourage you to illustrate your super art teacher persona, like mine here. If you're anything like me, you like to doodle, am I right? Either with pencil or paper or perhaps digitally during sessions like this. Doodle away, fellow creatives. You are in good company, and we will make sure to celebrate those superhero doodles at the end of today's session. So as you chat and as you doodle, I will share the story of how I discovered my superpower. And I'm taking you back in time, pre-COVID, if you can imagine it. I was 32 years old and was teaching and thriving in Zurich, Switzerland. I was teaching K through 12 art by day at 2 different international schools, and I was teaching education majors at the University of Missouri, St. Louis by night online. Best of both worlds. I was fulfilled, I was emotionally strong and physically pretty strong too. At that time, I would joke with my husband that I could deadlift him because of my practice in CrossFit classes. Now, speaking of weight, there was one particular evening I had just finished one of those workouts, and I was settling in for a long-awaited Zoom reunion with a cherished friend. But mid-call, I started to feel a little bit strange. I started to feel really heavy. My right side in particular was so heavy. I excused myself in order to get some fresh air from the Zoom call, but I ended up calling for help instead. I didn't know it then, but I was suffering a stroke. Now, eventually, the right doctors were able to properly diagnose me, but leading up until that point, I experienced a flood of emotions and uncertainty. You wouldn't even imagine. So how did I face down those emotions and uncertainty during and after my stroke? Well, I called upon my personal superpowers. I used my power of creativity to communicate my emotions and document my trauma over time. I drew, I painted, I manipulated photographs, I hand stitched. Heck, I even used coloring books as a way to combat my confusion, anger, and pain at that time. But you know what? A superhero sometimes needs backup. And what I couldn't do on my own through creative endeavors, I sought support from my doctors, my husband, and also my mentors, my art education heroes, Dr. Karen Cummings, Dr. Lewis Langford, my close friend, Dr. Jennifer Fisher. These folks rushed to my aid like the helpful sidekicks that you see in those Marvel comics. And I couldn't have made it through without that backup. These were my mentors, they were my friends, and they were like that protective symbolic cape that all superheroes wear. And these pieces of art, these are remnants from that personal battle. They remind me daily of how I could lean into my superpowers and my super friends to power through. I share this story with you today, not because I want you to feel sorry for me or to conjure any sort of worry for yourself. I share this story because it represents triumph. It represents strength in a time of adversity. It represents our shared experience as art educators at large. And now more than ever, we need our superpowers to fight down the evils surrounding us in the here and now. This includes the coronavirus and so much more. I wish I had the power to tackle all of these concerns at once. This is a surreal time in countless ways. Hopefully by this point in the talk, you've caught on to my overarching shtick for today. We are talking superpowers on all levels, folks. We are talking about super learners, super educators, super tools, and super strategies. Now, in the Zoom room, it's a little bit hard to see all of your faces, but I know you are there. I know that you are all super, but there aren't just super teachers like yourself. There are super learners as well. Let me tell you about one special learner in my life and how he found his superpower. To date, I've had the honor of teaching learners of all ages from all around the world. I've taught little learners, I've taught experienced learners, I've taught learners who need a little extra encouragement sometimes. I've taught learners that fly to such incredible heights. I've taught learners that don't give up. And I've taught learners that found the courage to ask for help. Learners are incredible. And like you, there are certain learners that are particularly sticky for me. Now, when I say sticky, I'm thinking about Spider-Man stickiness. You know how Spider-Man can stick to surfaces? Well, these are the types of student memories that stick with me and follow me in my day-to-day. And this is Kane. Kane was one of my middle school students back in the day, and Kane was also a student with autism. While he spoke very little in the art studio, Kane was very expressive, and I could tell when Kane was joyful and excited. I could also tell you when Kane was frustrated and near close to quitting. And that frustration would most often creep up when Kane was presented with a blank sheet of paper. That blank sheet of paper was an obstacle to be overcome. And it was intimidating for Kane. And boy, he fought that enemy with tooth and nail. I wanted to alleviate that evil for Kane. We tried something together. Kane loved his school issued iPad. And before even approaching the blank sheet of paper one day, we tried sketching out some ideas on his iPad first. This opened the floodgates for Kane. Art came spilling out of this child. It seemed that for Kane, the less permanent feel of the digital page was less intimidating. He could take more risks, he could be experimental, he could finally have fun while making his artwork. And the digital drawing helped prep Kane for the next step. In this case, that sheet of paper and pastels. We had discovered not only a process that Kane worked well with, we had unknowingly unraveled the best way for Kane to feel empowered and proud of his artwork. Finally, in this case, the iPad was his protective cape. And with that cape, Kane could unleash the true artist within. So, how has this experience with Kane informed my work with learners at large? I know that when given the right tools in the right circumstances, learners are bold and they can be dangerous with their art in a totally good way. Here are some more of my super artists from the past. And I tell you what, anyone who questions my use of the word bold should encounter a first grader with a cape. Watch out, world. These guys will swiftly call out any crime with crayon and glue stick in hand. I mean, look at these proud faces having fun. What else have I learned about learners? Learners can create with the most basic of prompts and materials when a culture of creativity is nurtured. That same group of caped crusaders you saw earlier spent an entire quarter using superheroes as a platform to explore a whole host of topics, from weather patterns to relationship building to sustainability. And you know what? They were more than happy with paper, crayons, and markers as their medium. We made comic strips and comic books. We designed costumes for ourselves and our sidekicks. We studied superhero stories, all while identifying the hidden superheroes among us. We set up our own comic book store in the school library. We hosted the poshest of posh book signings and even reenacted our favorite superhero scenes together. Would you believe that I even caught a few students practicing and drawing their superheroes on the playground one day? I took full advantage of my super obsessive artist and ran with the curriculum. You know what else I've learned about learners, and I'm secretly super envious of? Learners are brave. These learners, my learners, they jumped into every activity, every project, every critique with the speed of Quicksilver and the energy of Thor. Thinking back to my superhero story, I would have loved some of that hidden power. But I know what you might be thinking. These stories are good, but they predate the pandemic. We are in a whole new world, and that I can't deny. But I do have a rebuttal. Even after saying just now that I envied how brave my students are, I have to remind myself that I too am brave. I am brave, you are brave. And how do I know that? I've had the privilege of learning more about so many of you that have been a part of this particular social media group, the Online Art Teachers K through 12 group. This is a social media group that was created in March when the pandemic really hit. It was created as a service project by art teachers for art teachers, and it's led by my dear friend, Dr. Trina Harlow. And I consider myself one of the happy sidekicks, in this case, supporting the broader initiatives of the group, which now has over 18,000 members. This social media group has confirmed for me over and over again what I know to be true about art teachers at large. And you know what I know about super art teachers? Just like your super students, you are bold. You may recognize these bold art teachers. We have Holly Kincaid on the left and Bob Reeker on the right. Here, they are using their creativity to create their own superhero disguises, disguises that have delighted and inspired so many people in this social media group. I know that each of you are bold in your own right, whether it be publicly in a school Facebook page of your own, or just in front of your own students day in and day out. Holly and Bob serve as fellow superhero leaders of the online art teachers K through 12 Facebook group. And here's the whole gang together. I consider this the online art teachers K through 12 Justice League, who works tirelessly to support art teachers all over the world. It's an honor and a privilege to work and learn right alongside these super art teachers. You know what else I know about super art teachers? You are creative, just like your super students. You are not only creative in how you translate learning in this new pandemic world, you're documenting your experiences in the most natural way through drawing, making, molding, constructing, stitching, even coloring like I did during my story. These are just a few of the many pandemic themed art pieces shared by online art teacher K through 12 group members. And it's these sorts of images that will go down in history as representing one of the greatest enemies of our time, that being COVID-19. These sketchbook pages are documented for years to come as artifacts from this unique time that we're living through. And I want to thank you, super art teachers, for illustrating your experiences in these incredible ways. Want to know something else, super art teachers? You are brave. I continue to witness super art teachers trying new things and stepping outside of their teacher comfort zones. More and more teachers are sharing that choice-based art education has been their best approach in keeping creativity in students' lives with little supplies or materials available. Here are just a few of those incredible choice boards shared on the Facebook group page. And here are a few more. I, for one, have never before witnessed such an outpouring and sharing of resources, lessons, and ideas from this particular community. It's like the amazing lesson plan exchange that many of you host each year at your state and national conferences, but on a whole nother superhero scale. And you are trying other things as well. You're experimenting with new media. You're using YouTube as a resource and also a space to post your super videos for students. All while still keeping careful watch on the personal and emotional safety of our students. These are some of the early postings and exercises I've seen from folks looking for creative ways to keep the morale of their students and themselves up during this challenging time. Now, speaking of morale, can I just mention the Bitmoji movement? I know, it's not for everyone, but the fact that art teachers are willing to try new things for the benefit of their students, their schools, and the field at large make you all super in my mind. But it hasn't been easy, and you know that. You lived that. You continue to live through it. To that I say, remember my first story, my stroke story. That was a scary story for me. And at that time, I wasn't sure how it would end. And I don't have the ability to look into the future. I unfortunately did not get that superpower. If someone in the room does, though, drop us a line in the chat, will you? Will you? But joking aside, I can venture to guess what the future might hold based on what I've seen from you super art teachers. I've seen firsthand how art teachers rise to the occasion and fight for the future of our field. I see it in the online art teacher K through 12 Facebook community and beyond. And this gives me hope that we're not only going to get through this trying time, but that we will land triumphantly in a new normal where the arts are really paramount. Super art teachers, I just have to say you are incredible. Art literally saved my life. You heard my stroke story. It saved my life, and it will save so many of us and so many of our students during this trying and surreal time. And to that, I praise you, I thank you, but I must also implore you, keep pushing, keep doing what you were doing. You are making a difference each and every single day for your students. And remember, together we are bold, we are creative, we are brave, we are amazing. That's right, amazing. If anything, I hope you walk away from this session knowing that, feeling that, being that. These are challenging times, no doubt. But remember, art teachers, remember your superpowers, and together we will find our way. Thank you so much, super art teachers, for being here and for listening. I salute you. With that, I leave you, comrades. Don't forget your cape. I will say, and I have my handy apron here, isn't it convenient, folks, how an apron also doubles as a cape? I want to leave you with these wonderful faces of empowerment. Let these superheroes guide you for the remainder of the year and far into the future. Before we open it up for conversation and to see those wonderful superhero selfie sketches, I want to leave you with one final gift. I wanted to share my original sample lesson plan that got all of this started with those first grade superheroes. I mentioned that this lesson exploded into an entire unit that took a whole quarter. This was the starter lesson where it all began when we were investigating weather and superheroes. I invite you to take it, make it your own, and see what your superheroes do for you in your super art classroom. Thank you so much for joining me today.